All right, under one flag, a year at Rower by Liz Packhurst with Pam Strickland. All right, I want you to listen for some figurative language. She does a really good job using a lot of it in here. When I first woke up, I wasn't sure where I was. I sensed someone watching me from the side of the bed. When I turned my head, I didn't see my parents as I expected. I saw a boy about my age. I blinked to be sure I was seeing correctly. I felt groggy from the anesthesia still in my system. I remembered being rushed in to have my appendix removed. Because my father was an administrator at the War Relocation Center at Rower, the camp hospital was the closest. The boy, like most of the children residing at the prison camp, was dressed just as I was dressed. That is, when I wasn't in the hospital. They keep checking to see if you're awake, he said. Who are you? I tried to sit up, but gravity seemed to pull me down. I'm George, he said, extending his hand in greeting. I'm a courier for the newspaper here in the camp, the Rower Outpost. He held up a copy for my inspection. What's your name? Jefferson, I replied, but everyone calls me Jeff, except my mama when she gets mad at me. I know what you mean. When my mother gets mad at me, she says my entire name, George Akiro Kabashi. You get in trouble too? I will in a minute if I don't deliver these papers to the nurses, he said. I'm supposed to be working. Do you get paid? Well, not really, but I do get into lots of places where I wouldn't normally be allowed. I'm in here nearly every day. I'll try to see you tomorrow. Do you notice the tower in the window? The guard tower? Sure enough, George stopped by after school the next day. Mama had been visiting earlier and had left to go home and start dinner. Well, you didn't miss much at school, he said. Whose class are you in? I asked. Miss Thompson, he said. She's not bad. George was a year ahead of me. That's why I didn't recognize him. I'm in Miss Riley's class, I said. It's tough because she's best friends with my aunt, so everything gets back to my parents. George reached in his satchel and produced a small decorated wooden box. Want to play marbles? We aren't exactly outside in the dirt, I said. I was cranky and tired of being in bed. That didn't stop George. We can use this string. We can use the string that I have, see? He took the string, made a circle on my bed covers, and began dividing his marble collection for 2 players. You go first, he said. But when I bent forward to line up my shot, I felt a sharp pain. My stitches, I winced. I better not. Okay, he said. We can do this later, after you get your stitches out. There are plenty other games we can play. Five days later, I was released. It was a breezy, balmy day, typical of March in the Arkansas Delta. George was waiting for me when I left the hospital. He was energetic and full of ideas. Let's make paper airplanes and see if we can fly them over the barracks. Before the day was over, we had not only flown paper airplanes, we had made a model Eiffel Tower with paper and paste and used some gauze from the hospital to play blind man's bluff. It didn't take long to see why George knew so many people at Rower. He got along with everyone, adults and kids alike. My parents took to him right away, and soon we were spending most afternoons together after school. Often we had to take George's younger sister, Nancy, along with us when their mother was working as a clerk in the dry goods department. Sometimes Daddy would give us permission to go to the little general store just outside camp. If we didn't have any luck, we would take Nancy to watch the older men carve cypress knees gathered from the bayou nearby. There's the carvings. Baseball was one of our favorite pastimes. It was just as popular in the camp as it was in the rest of America. Our pickup games grew popular as spring turned to summer. George was always near the top of the batting lineup. not so much because of his power, but because of his speed. He could steal bases in broad daylight and slide into home plate like the greased pigs I chased in the contest at the county fair. The day Dizzy Dean showed up was a day we would always remember. I don't mean the pitcher for the St. Louis Cardinals and the Chicago Cubs, although he did grow up in Arkansas too. I mean the puppy who wandered in, skin and bones, and was soon wiggling in Nancy's arms. To tell the truth, the game pretty much fell apart after he showed up. It took all three of us to persuade my father to let the puppy stay in camp. Mostly he stayed in our apartment because pets weren't allowed in the inmates' barracks. Did you hear the figurative language? He compared it to greased pigs and said the puppy was skin and bones. George and I always participated in the Camp Boy Scout troop. We wore our uniforms proudly. We loved to march, even when it wasn't part of the program. The troop gave George some time to be around grown men. When we first met, I assumed his father was dead. I soon learned that he was being held in the Department of Justice Detention Center. Because he was a language teacher and spoke both English and Japanese, the U.S. authorities suspected he was a spy for the Japanese government. Men with badges came right after Pearl Harbor and took him away, George explained. He's being held in New Mexico. He writes us letters. We write him. Nancy draws pictures for him. At my insistence, my father began to help Mrs. Kabachi in her efforts to get her husband released from the DOJ camp so that he could join his family at Rower. Daddy wrote some letters on behalf of the Kabachi family. My grandfather had long known U.S. Senator Hattie Caraway, and she was able to open some doors for him. We spent all spring practicing our scout skills and working on merit badges. We studied Morse code, 3 longs, 3 shorts, and 3 longs meant SOS. We are in trouble. We memorized the flag signals used between ships to communicate during radio blackouts. Our favorite activity was knot tying, bow lines, double half hitches. The more complicated, the better. You know, none of the other books that we've read about this time has talked about them having scouts or anything like that. This is pretty interesting. In June, the troop participated in a jamboree in Mississippi, a week-long campout with scouts from 3 states. We competed with other troops for prizes. The first aid contest was the most fun. We tied broken legs to splints, treated patients for shock, and carried wounded on stretchers to the first aid station. I don't know if you can see. Do you see how? You see way, look, where it says the wounded and broken legs. Do you see that? They put it in parentheses to say that they weren't really broken. They were pretending to be broken. But for emphasis, they put quotation marks around those words. There we go. Our troop came in second in the compass contest. Orienteering is what they called it. It was set up like a treasure hunt with prizes hidden at the end of each location drill. Food always seemed to taste better when you eat outdoors, and we looked forward to supper every night. We were usually worn out from a full day of activities, and the hot food seemed like a reward for a hard day's work. We cooked potatoes in hot coals of our campfire and baked pot pies in tinfoil ovens we devised. Okay, we're going to stop here a minute, and I want you to make a list of all the figurative language that you heard and some things that are different from any of the other stories that we've talked about so far.